situated real quick. If you do have a question, please join the lecture questions channel on Slack. And that way it has a link to a Google Docs, Google Forms document that you can like anonymously ask your question if you're not feeling up to people knowing that you need to ask a question. So, okay, so welcome to LC 101. I won't go into any more details than that because John went through pretty much everything. So who am I? I'm not Jean Valjean, fortunately. So my name is Joe Kausert. Like I said, I'm an LC 101 graduate. I graduated in 2017. I originally found out about the class because like my wife and I found out we were pregnant with our first child. And yeah, and I was like, okay, I need to figure something out, that this whole part-time work isn't working. So I found out about Launch Code. I did Launch Code while having a newborn, while working 80 hours a week at UPS for peak season. So if I can do all that, you can handle this class. Trust me. Like I said, I was you. Like I said, I'm a former LC apprentice. I did my apprenticeship at NIPR. I've been a teaching assistant since 2017. I'm currently a software engineer at MSTS. I am a gamer / streamer, not so much streaming anymore, but I'm hoping to here soon eventually. I am the husband to Corrine and father to Mara Quinn and Emma Violet. And last cohort, they had superlatives, and I was TA most likely to brighten up a student's day. So hopefully I can put some of that into this as well. So my contact information on Slack, I think it's Joe Kausert. On Twitter, I'm at Joe Kausert. My email is listed, and my LinkedIn is Joseph Kausert. Someone asked in my the Google Forms, are lecture PowerPoints going to be available for review outside of lectures? Yes, they will. I'm going to upload them to my GitHub, which I will also link into the Slack. So, what should you expect from LC 101? So we're starting out with, I'm giving you this map of learning. So everything feeds on and builds on everything else. So when you do your reading, you should be able to then do your exercises. Your exercises and the reading feeds into this lecture. And then after that, we feed into the studio and to the assignments. The thing is if you skip off any of these, it's going to cause you to have trouble keeping up on other things. So yes, the exercises and the studios are not graded, but they are super important. But like John said, I wouldn't spend too much time like going back and doing all the exercises. There's a reason why when you're working out, most of the time, like prioritize a certain like body area. So I'm working on my arms today or my legs. You don't do everything all the time. So what will I go over in this lecture? What I will go over is I'll do a chapter overview, like I'll go over what you should have learned in the chapter. I will talk about some of the parts in the chapter that could be confusing. I will emphasize parts in the chapter that I feel that should be emphasized. I will go over any questions that you have about the chapter or questions in general. What I won't go over is everything in the chapter. You're supposed to read it. And that's it. That's the list. So ask questions, make sure, utilize your TAs because they're a huge resource. They're great. I've worked with the majority of them in some capacity or another, whether they were my students or other TAs in the past. So yeah, so Unit 1, technically it's Chapter 4. Your first 3 chapters were like the basic learning to code and all that. So we're going to just hop right into data and variables. Let me see. So chapter recap. So we learned about value of a specific piece of data and that each value has a data type. Strings can be enclosed in either single or double quotes. Quotations can be nested inside each other, double inside single, single inside double. You can use type of to determine value types. Type conversions, you can convert from a number to a string unless it's like an alpha character. You can't convert a string of alpha characters to a number. You'll get NaN when working with that. That's a basic overview. So variables. Okay, let's talk about variables. Using var versus let. We're not going to deep dive into it because it's a lot of it's to do with scope and hoisting, which we will learn later. But just that you should use let versus var when declaring your variable types. It is an older code, sir, but it checks out. So when creating a variable, when you're assigning something to a variable, you want to use a single equals because that is the assignment. When you are wanting to compare variables, you will be using triple equals. Oh, go back. So the variable is assigned to a value is 1 equals. Variable equals a value is triple equals. Okay, so talking about variables, I'm using a mason jars for example. So in the first, we're gonna just create our variable. We're gonna let mason jar. So now we have this empty mason jar that can store anything that we want. So we're gonna assign, we're gonna make raspberry jam be in our mason jar. That's initializing our variable. And then we can also reassign the variable and say, hey, I don't need jam in this anymore. I cleaned it out. Let's put money in it. So now mason jar equals $25. Once variables have been created, they can be used later in your program anywhere that that value can be used. It's literally like the best tool you have in your, one of the best tools you have in your toolbox. So another type is a constant or const. So we use these when we want something not to change. So I would say like it's talked about later on. So like readline, any value. So like if you didn't have like access to the math operator. So say if you want to, I'm like, I know pi is 3.14. So I want to make a variable pi that's 3.14. So you would do constant pi because pi is not going to change. So yeah, just imagine that this mason jar lid has been glued shut and it can't be opened. So that's what a constant is. So you can't change the constant once you, like later on down the line, if you try to reassign it, it will give you an error. So it's a type error, assignment to constant variable. So you're not able to change it that way. Okay, so variable namings. So you want variable names to be descriptive. You want to provide context to the data they contain. And you want to provide context to how the data will be used. So for examples, area of a circle, radius of a circle, speed of a car. Was it, they used astronaut mass is going to be in the studio. Like it's, you want to be as descriptive as possible. And so that is not only helpful for you, but it's helpful for your future self when you come back to your code and go, what the heck was I doing? Also, naming conventions. JavaScript uses Camelcase. So the way it's utilized is it starts with lowercase and then any subsequent word is capitalized. So if it was, like I said, I'll go back to the last slide. So as you see, area of circle. So there's the O and the C are capitalized because they're the next two words. This is just how JavaScript does it. Depending on what programming language you're using, there's different naming conventions, and those are pretty easy to find. Okay, expressions and operations and other operators. Oh my. So expressions and evaluations. An expression is a combination of values, variables, operators, and calls to functions. An expression can be thought of as a formula that is made up of multiple pieces. The evaluation of an expression produces a value, known as the return value. We say that an expression returns a value. So let's get into operators and operands. The ones you may know, obviously plus, minus, multiplication, division. The ones you may not know, this is modulus operator, exponentation, increment, and decrement. Incrementing, plus plus, you would be adding one to a value. Decrementing is you're subtracting one from a value. And always remember PEDMIS. Parentheses, exponents, division, multiplication, additions, and subtraction. Make sure all your math is working properly.
And so, sorry, Joey, where would modulus fit into PEMDAS then? Because it's not one of the letters.
You don't have to worry about, it's not actually in there right now. Like it's not within, you don't really utilize modulus within like an actual like mathematical sense normally. But I'm about to dive into that here. So the modulus operator, one of the main uses that we utilize this with is to see if like a number is like even or odd within like the coding universe. So pretty much it computes the remainder after division of one number by another. So here we have, you write it with the percent sign. So here we have 2 modulus 2. Can anyone think of what the answer here is with the computes the remainder after division of one number by another?
0.
That is correct. So 2 modulus 2 is 0. And now we have 5 modulo 3. Can anyone tell me what they think that is?
2.
See a lot of 2s in chat. Nice job. That is correct. And then finally, 10 modulo 7.
3.
Okay, that is correct. So yeah, so like a lot of times is like when I'm utilizing modulus, I am determining whether a number is even. And that would be, so anything modulo 2 that comes with a 0, and the answer is 0, that would be an even number. Anything that has a remainder would be an odd number. Okay, let's hop into this input, which is ReadLineSync. So yeah, so what they're utilizing a node library. So ReadLineSync, that's why you have to require it. That's just anytime you use a new like node library later on down the line, you have to require it once it's installed so that you can utilize it. And one of the reasons why we use it as a constant is because we want to make sure that it's not changed by somebody or anything down the line. So what this is doing is it'll prompt your user or whoever runs your program. It'll prompt them to answer whatever question you have within the question text. You can use your input in different variables. Just remember that all inputs are treated as a string. So if you need a number, then don't forget your conversion functions to number and to string. And yeah, so any questions? I have the...
There were 2 questions that popped up.
What's up?
I think there were two questions that popped up in the chat, one of which was asking if you could change from a constant to a let after declaring it. And then the difference between a strict equals and not strict equals.
So utilizing the strict equals versus not strict equals, so that's two equals versus 3. You're just comparing, like non-strict, you're just comparing the value. So if you had, let me pull up VS Code. Can you guys see my screen now? See the code editor?
Yep, you're good.
All right, so double equal is value. It's determining value. So I could do let num. So let's do let number equal let string equal. Let's string num equal 10, right? So if I compare, so I can do num equal, actually let's, for this purposes, they need to be the same. Num equals 5. So if I do num and string num, if I log those out, which I'm not in a node environment, so I can't, so they will be considered equal because they are the same value, but they're not the same type. When utilizing strict equals, if you did the same thing, then it would not be equal because one's a string and one's a number. So, and then what was the other question, Anastasia?
Let's see. They asked if you could change, if you declared a let function, if you could have declared a variable as let, could you later on change it to a constant? I believe was the.
That's a good question. Give me 1 second. Boop. Hold on. Let me pull up this other window. I'm just going to pull up a replit.
Thank you for sharing your problem solving.
Yeah, this is literally like, this is what you'll end up doing all the time. It's most of the time it's going to be, does it work? No. Oh, it doesn't work. Okay, then let's try it again. So here. So we want to, so I'm going to name this const, just do example equals, will this change? So if you have a const and then later on you try and say let example equals something else, does this change? If I run it, I should get an error because, like I said, it's going to be this. It's the same. It's already been. This example was already been declared, so it should give me an error here. Yeah, identifying example has already been declared. So no, if you have a constant with named example, you can't just say let example. But what you can do is let new example equal to example. And so this is passed by, you're passing this by value, or as it might be reference. I'm not 100% sure.
They're asking if you can do it the other way around. Let example equals this, and then const example equals something else.
Oh no, it's still the same thing. Once you declare, like you could, once you declare, like you can't have two variables with the same name. So either way, it doesn't work. It'll give you an error every time. But if you need something to be a const, like there's nothing stopping you from say I assign this as whatever, and then there's nothing saying, hey, I actually need this to be a constant because I don't want it to be changed later on. There's nothing stopping you from going into your code and turning it into a constant. But you want to make sure, that's the difference between like utilizing let versus utilizing const, is you want to make sure that if you're utilizing a constant, you want to, that it is something that you don't want to be changed down the road. If there's any doubt that it could need to be changed, then use let instead. No, Larry. So if you initialize it as a let, and then you try to initialize the same variable name as a const later on, it'll throw an error, even if you do it either way.
But just to be clear, we can continue to change our let variables as long as we're not using a constant. So if we started with let example equal, assign something in general, we can change it as long as we're not making.
I can show you that right now. Right, so I have this as let. So then now we want to make example equal to 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we want example equal to, yes, this did change. And so if I console log each one of these examples, it will change each time. See? Prints out each one, because when you're reassigning the variable, you're pretty much, it's kind of like like I said, it's like the mason jar. So you're setting the mason jar to ASDF, then you're cleaning out the mason jar and changing it to 1, 2, 3, 4. And as again with the yes, this did change. But if I did that, it's going to throw an error because you can't reassign a constant variable. Any other questions? Other than my off-topic question of what games did I stream and play mostly? Yeah, I can talk about ReadLineSync. So I need to do this real quick. One of the best things about this, the launch code site, is if you had a question and you're like, oh, I need to know something about ReadLine, then I just go back to the ReadLine. So I'm just going to straight import this because it's just quicker on everyone. So this is what I do on a daily basis. I find the code I need and I go and copy paste it to where I need it. Google is your best friend. Okay, so we have the ReadLineSync, and then you have now you're setting up your info as the input question. Something else you could do, you can have more than one. So you have second info, like these are bad names. So I would say question 1, question 2. So you can have as many, you can utilize this for as many questions as you need. And when I run it, it'll prompt me for the first one first, once it installs it. And then I can type whatever. This is my answer. Then it'll prompt me again. This is my other answer. And then I'll be done. And then you can utilize these other, like, multiple inputs within it to have within your program. So anything you need to have multiple inputs.
I guess I'm just a little bit confused because coming from Python, like, you wouldn't have to put another line of code before you ask for an input. So I guess maybe the node thing is something that I'm not understanding.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So yeah, it's so this part here is it's initializing the ReadLineSync itself, and then this is your actual, like, your equivalent to whatever you would do an input in another language.
Okay. So the ReadLineSync is like a separate node, and there's like other I don't know about nodes, so that's, I think, maybe where I'm just like.
Yeah, we're not you don't. That's the thing. Like, you don't need to know
Oh, okay.
deep dive into Node, because we won't be going in really into it. It's just what Replit is built on, and Node is like the back end on JavaScript. So.
Okay. Cool. Thanks.
Framework. Node is a framework. Thanks, Kevin.
Hey, Joe, like you can rename input to whatever you want, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you can make a peanut butter jelly sandwich as long as you reference it correctly in lines 3 and 4. Input is just the name of this ReadLineSync object that you're using, right? And so then we can use the question input like that.
Yeah, you can use .question on whatever you name it, and in order to get the response of the person. Okay. Here we go. Okay, so I have where's the appropriate place to add conversion function when utilizing, did someone already answer that? Yes, they did. Nice job, Justin. You guys are killing it. Yeah, Atticus, that's right. You can utilize /n and /t to do new lines and new tabs within your. So if I wanted this answer to be on a new line, I could do /n. Is it that? Is it? Oh, it's \n. And then when I run this, my answer will actually be on the next line. Okay, Isaac. So the way you would, I think the question was, if you want to have a string with a mix of single quotes and double quotes in the string, how's it done? So the way I do it, like I'm weird because I like single quotes. So let's string equal. So it'd be like saying, so I'm quoting somebody. So let's go, Joe said, double quote, I could use these multiple quotes in a string, end quote. But I don't know offhand how I would escape the double quotes. I'm pretty sure I know there's a way, so. Escape quotes.
You shouldn't have to escape them if you're using the single quote inside of them.
Unless you have another single quote within that.
Correct.
Just the backslash, yeah.
Answered that on the chat.
Just the backslash. But Google is going to be your best friend if you have an error. So say like the const error, like I had earlier, you'd want to, you can literally just copy paste your error into Google and find a lot of stuff that might answer your question, it might not. So the real skill is to figure out what you actually need for it to do. It's true, Christian. All earthly knowledge is on Google.
Joe, can you use backticks?
Why am I getting the backticks? I don't want to get into that right now.
No, I mean for just for doing a mixture of single and doubles.
I don't know. Let's see. I'm used to my Mac, so I need to find command and control instead of command. So yeah, so apparently it does work. I did not know that. Thank you, John.
The more you know.
Yes, the more you know. You also use backticks on to make template strings, but we'll dive deeper on that later on. All right, so Panella in chat asked, why does, it looks like you're using the wrong, I think you're using the wrong in, I thought. No, that's the right in. All right, well, I'll type it out and let's see. We can do this. We have time. So I'm guessing this is actually a little bit of the studio, so we're getting a little freebie from me. We don't know what time is yet, so we can set a time. Plus slash in. Wrong slash. So time equal PM. So we run it. We don't know if there's a new line. So let's console. So yeah, it's working on my end. Because if there wasn't a slash in here, it would just print the ... underneath. Yes, escape characters have to be strings. Okay, see if there's any other ones that weren't answered.
I think someone asked if we could use a comma instead of the addition sign to concatenate a console.log statement.
Well, we can, so just like a comma, like right here.
I believe so, yeah.
I don't think so. Oh, apparently you can. That's news to me. I've never used a comma, but I don't usually use pluses, and I don't usually use basic concatenation anymore anyway.
I would say that on the comma front, it is probably more, I would say it's probably better to use pluses because you don't want to get in a situation where you're going to use commas, because when you move later on down the road here, you're going to use commas for a different thing, for parameters, for passing in something to a function call. Console log is a function. You can think of it that way, but it just might confuse you later on in the future when Joe talks about those things.
Okay, so I don't see anyone that hasn't been answered by a TA. So does anyone else have any other questions before I send you off to your TA groups? Because that was my last slide that I think I closed on accident.
How do we go to the TA groups?
So in Slack, they should all have their own Zoom calls that you would join. So yeah, if there's nothing else, it's studio time. So one thing you can do is utilize each other. You are your biggest asset. So if you know you're ahead of somebody, or if you get done early with the studio, I would say usually say help your neighbor, but since we're all on Zoom, just help your fellow teammates, because guys are going to be in it for the long haul. And I have nothing but faith that you guys will do great. And yeah, that's all I got. And if you have any other questions for me, like I said, I'm going to post this to my GitHub and put the link in Slack, and I'll have all the slides and has my contact information on that as well. So
Thank you.
Go TAs, disperse, open your calls for your people.
If any student is unsure of their TA group or anything like that and wants to stick around here, has questions for me, feel free to do so. But otherwise, feel free to jump into your TA groups.